So I think the first thing is, and I've been like going to, like there's like a Postgres conference this week that I've been going to. So it's like, it's something, these are things that I keep in the back of my mind too when I'm like going to these events. The first one is actually like, I think you can show up to an event and be like, I got to talk, I just have to make the most of this. But try to like really like you're at an event that like has people of similar interest to you. So try to enjoy it, like yes, you do want to put yourself out there and meet people, but have just pleasant conversations with people. Remember that you're building like a genuine connection, and you're trying to find people who are these kind of helpers, mentors, and occasionally a warm lead, but lots of times it's going to be these like helpers and mentors. So that means like try to find areas of common ground. And it doesn't have to be, I say it doesn't have to be like transactional, but also doesn't always have to open up with as straight about career either. It could be about like just any areas of common interest, like where you're from or etc. And just that's fine, and that can last for a little while. And then as when you're talking, they may have some things like professional, if they kind of steer it professionally, or just otherwise, like try to provide help. So that's a good way just to like get kind of like buy-in, is thinking of ways that you can help. I think we talked about this. So I talked about this, right? Like various communities they would not have heard, like lots of times would not have heard of, and I build like kind of like connections with people a lot by just suggesting these types of communities, because that's very, very helpful for them. Then we talk about, I think we talked about this, like a soft ask, or asking for advice, and then, right, like a soft ask. Whereas you can say something like, I'm in the job market now, so just seeing what's out there. I'm looking to get into this data analysis world, tell me, so, if you know anyone or blah, blah, right? Like, do you mind if I get your LinkedIn? I'd love to reach out and learn about this. Things I've seen, right, when like providing these asks is like, it's actually not so bad when if people even like say no, because they don't typically say no. Instead, what they'll do is they'll just say, okay, actually, like, do you mind if I get your LinkedIn, right? Like, and they'll like, I'm not going to give you my number, but can I get yours, type of thing, and that's fine. Or like, I'll just straight out say like, yeah, so if you guys are hiring juniors, sometimes they are, and so I'm going to follow up with some people next week, and when they're not, it's actually not like super awkward, because they just like don't say anything, and then we just change the subject in a second. It's actually pretty smooth transition, or they'll say like, certainly if something comes to mind, or maybe in the future, I'll think about it, and you just move on. So it's really not like a showstopper to provide it like an ask, as long as it's just kind of like, you understand that maybe there's a chance and maybe there's not. And then you follow up, right? Like you can either like think of a way that help them again, or just like say thank you. That's fine. And then from there you can kind of feel out. They might just flat out say like, yeah, and if there's any way I can help you, let me know, right? And then the other thing to say is results will vary. Like it can. So for me, I've been going to this conference the past couple of days. Like the first day, I met 5 or 6 people probably who said like, yeah, maybe, like, or like, reach out. We're thinking about this. This sounds good. And then today, like, I met people, but they were not looking for juniors, right? So that's just going to happen. That happens to everybody. There's no way around it. So just have a long view about this, right? Some of these are going to be successful. Some of these are not. And it's just outside of your control, right? And then also you just might feel more comfortable at certain events or certain days. Maybe you had a good meal, and then like you feel more comfortable then, or whatever. Like, so just like know, like that's part of the process. So yeah, I have various like kind of like soft openings, right? Like I said, you can kind of talk about anything. One thing to note, so when you kind of, after you've spoken a while, it feels like, all right, like if you want to move the conversation in a direction, I would, typically you don't just start talking about yourself. What you do instead is you ask the person, hey, so tell me, you ask the person more professional questions. So tell me more about like what your company does, what do you do for work, right? They'll return the favor, right? And that's how you start to introduce yourself. So that's why it's really like just fine to talk about anything initially. What do you think about the conference? Like, have you met any interesting people here, or just where are you from? Like typical cliche openings work fine. Where are you based out of? I asked that a lot of question, a lot today. And then when I wanted to turn it more professional, I just say like, oh, cool. So what? So tell me, I actually haven't heard of this. Like, you tell me what your company does, and again, the whole reason why is so that then they'll ask me what I do, right? Um, cool. So we talked about providing advice, getting advice. The other thing to note is like as you go more to these kinds of events, people talk about these kinds of events at the events. So in other words, they'll be like, "How is this meetup?" And it'll be like, "Oh, well, this one's okay. I went to a different one," or like, "How is this conference?" Like same type of thing, right? So like, it might be a little uncomfortable the first time, but as you go to more of these, like you'll get the hang of it, and you might even like see some of the same people, which is nice. All right. And then I kind of say, here's different things that you can do to ask for, and just like calmly kind of ask. And then if you're not comfortable providing, asking right away, you can always follow up and ask later, right? So if it doesn't feel like there's a good opportunity to ask there, or you forget to, or whatever, just ask for their LinkedIn or follow or find them on LinkedIn afterwards, and do one of these things: check in, say it was great meeting you, and then if they reply, then you can say like, hey, I got a lot out of our conversation. Can we talk sometime if you have some time? And then the other thing I'd say is like, you'll be surprised. Like for instance, some of the people that like were very receptive to me were people that I was like, just like at first glance, I was like, this guy is just like not interested in talking to anybody. I don't know if it's even worth, talking to him. And then they're like, yeah, that would be great. Like, these are like, they were very receptive. And then, but if they do say no, or like, they're like, you get the silence, just don't push it. It's fine. And then same thing, like, for me, like sometimes like close contact not respond to you when you expect, whereas like a weaker connection will. In like the 2 Hour Job Search book that I get some of these references from. So one, part of this is timing and luck, but in the 2 Hour Job Search, he describes this as like people that are kind of like promoters slash connectors, and some people that are like more like obligate, like they feel obligated to help, and then other people that are just not, not going to really be doing that. So part of it is just the person's personality as to whether or not they're always looking to like build these connections and provide help, as to whether or not someone just feels obligated to help but then actually doesn't feel comfortable following through. And then the third type is people that just aren't interested in in helping at all, and kind of will let you know, right? So and some, or they just aren't able to. So like I said, like it's part of it's based on timing and luck. Part of it is just based on the kind of individual. So even if it's a close contact, if they're just not a type of person who really knows how to do this, they might not help, But that doesn't mean a weaker connection won't. That's kind of the point. Yeah, one story that comes to mind, like about only one time have I ever been like aggressively told no with like asking for something, and that was like years ago. I was thinking of like can I like get students to do like little projects, but also kind of like our externship thing. So this was like through the Brooklyn Library. So I went to like this coffee truck thing and said like, hey, can we build your website or something like that? After talking to the guy, do you have a website? Do you mind if we build it? He was like, no, like blah blah. And then so he kind of like responded aggressively. Afterwards, his coworker stepped outside of the truck and said, that's just him. I'm actually thinking of leaving this company pretty soon anyway, and like I could use a website. So like even in the bad case, it worked. It was great, So like I don't know, like you'd be surprised. And the other thing I'd say is this is a really nice skill to build, like regardless. Like if you ever want to go, like really, so much of like, even if you get hired as an entrepreneur, or sorry, get hired as as like a data engineer, you may just find that there's little work for you to do, right? That people don't know how to use you. That's a very typical thing when you start a new job. So then kind of going around and being a bit entrepreneurial and seeing how you can help and getting some no's, but then also sometimes getting some yeses, that can really advance your career. Like so, and seeing ways that you can help, same thing on the job, that can really advance your career. I'm thinking back, I worked in India before, and it was really hard to network or figure out what's going on because people are talking in Hindi. Even though they all spoke English, they're talking in Hindi. So I like built, a little like Google Maps thing, plotting where individuals, where the salespeople lived, and then I literally walked around the office asking people if they needed help. And most of them, like so many, said no. But then one person was like, actually, let's talk to this person, and it ended up being, including this job. That was like maybe one of my top one or two positions I ever got was just by asking people for help if they needed help. Like people say the phrase like, in networking, like you have to kiss a lot of frogs to get a prince or whatever. It's kind of true. You'll find same thing with like these Slack communities. Some of them are a waste, and then some of them are like very, very useful. All right, so this is the building a connection. This is just like general rules for how to do this. But if you don't ask, people don't know. And I'd say like one thing also is because I'm like always working in coffee shops, and I just always am hearing people being like, oh, I just need to learn more or do more or do more, But comes a day where you just have to put yourself out there, because it's not the you doing more that's the barrier. The other phrase I was thinking of is just like, if you read about entrepreneurship, they'll say get out of the building, right? You can like entrepreneur. I think it's Steve Blank. But it's like, this is what he talks about. If you're like an entrepreneur, is you'll have these engineers who all they want to do is work on the product, right? Which is kind of like you guys, just enhancing your skills. But if you never get out of the building and see what people need, it feels good it feels like you're making progress, but you could be working on the wrong thing. This is kind of the same approach. All right, and then we have like tapping into an existing network. I think we talked about that before. Let's move into crafting an elevator pitch. I think this is kind of interesting. All right, so basically there's two kinds, or really three kinds of like pitches that you'll use. In an interview, like very typically people would just say like, hey, so tell me about yourself as the first question that they ask. Like I do that in interviews. If I'm like coming from another meeting or whatever, I didn't have the time to look at somebody's resume, I'm just like, hey, do you mind just telling me a little bit about yourself before we get started? What might be surprising is, this is not where you need to be selling yourself and talking through your past accomplishments. Rather, you're using this to like build a connection with your interviewer or the person that you're just talking to. All right. So same thing. If you go like on an informational interview, like you're looking for this as a way to, when they like kind of in the intro or introducing yourself, it's more like your journey. As opposed to here's everything I've done or here's the best things about me. So they go into that in this video, but basically by your journey, what I mean is like what made you want to go into this career, right? So for me, when I had an interview at Flatiron School and talking about teaching, I talked about like, the fact that, I was part of these nonprofits and, we had these opportunities to help people, but we saw that without pairing that with education, that basically we're never really getting to that last mile. We're never connecting the dots. And so I started, to actually really, provide some value. The hobbies and the types of work I kept doing kept moving towards education, because that seemed to be like the biggest value add for effort. So anyway, so I kept on getting interested in education and just kept seeing the projects I was doing move in that direction, and even found myself reading a book on being a teacher, and I decided, okay, if I'm reading a book on being a teacher, I should become a teacher. So that's emphasizing my interest, right, in teaching, and like my journey as to here I was doing something previously, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted because it wasn't so effective, and then here and then my interest really, if I'm like even finding myself reading a book on being a teacher, that's what told me this should be my career that's next. So again, like what you're focusing on is like your passion for this. You don't have to, part of that's in just like subtle emphasis, and part of that's in your story, right? And you can see like that kind of thing leads to more questions about your interests. Like why did you want to even read a book? Like what did you get out of reading that book on how to be a good teacher? So that's what I'd emphasize. The other thing that he brings up is he uses this model of the FIT model. So it's basically you want to talk, he says talk about your favorite part, talk about like what you wanted to improve, favorite part of a past job, what you want to improve, and then the transition. This is kind of like what I always talk about with a stepping stone, like so. But the point is with favorite part, you're never being negative about your past job ever. It's not like the silver lining was. There's not a silver lining. Everything was good. All right. So you never want to be negative about your past job. So you can say like so I worked like previously. I also had a job like as a marketer in insurance, and and it was boring. But I would never say that. It was like I worked as a marketer in insurance. Part of what we actually had to do was learn how to sell online, and that got me really interested in technology because I saw the impact of that. So like the past job is an opportunity to learn more about yourself if it's terrible, and then otherwise, it's always here's where I saw kind of the next step for me, right? So that's the improvement. It was a good thing because I got exposed to technology, the impact of it, and so I decided like I really want to work for a tech startup. That was the improvement, right? And then I worked to do that. So it's telling a story, which is really good, and it's like positive in nature. And then there's like the short elevator pitch. And basically the point is here, I've been to meetups before where I'm like, so, hey, why are you guys here? And I remember the response was just like, I think we're all here for the same place, man, to find a job. And I'm just like, well, like, I don't know. That's not a good answer, right? Like you're there because hopefully like you're going to meet some interesting people about similar type of thing. You're going to learn about something specifically. You can just say like, oh, I found these things to be like really interesting. I'm always like learning through these things. I'm always just learning more about like how people are using these tech stacks, specifically in this field. So we see that, I've seen this in my data engineering course, but here I really see, kind of even more technologies specific to healthcare, et cetera, right? Or I'm really able to see like their day to day. So again, you're talking about kind of what's making you interested about this. The more specific you can be, the better, typically. You can kind of go, you want to find interest in everything, but not being vague is really helpful. And then same thing, like even a social event, you can just mention what you do. Like, so for me, like there's an example of this. Like I just met, saw an old friend, and then they brought like their cousin along. And I said, I'm doing this data engineering boot camp, and right now, like we're in the stage of helping people get jobs. It was basically just like that, and then they obviously follow up. So you can just, one sentence, but like that led to the guy, saying like, send me some resumes, and we'll try to do some referrals. So, like you can always just like quickly kind of mention, even if it's just like at a social event, I work in a healthcare stats background, mainly with claims, but right now I'm looking actually to break into more of an engineering position. So it's not, right? You're letting them kind of ask about any of this stuff, but they might go, oh, really? I'll think about that. There might be some people I know, right? If it comes there. One thing I say is like finding your pitch. It can take some time to like really be genuine. Like you really want to, this should come from a genuine place. Sometimes you guys might think I'm just doing this because whatever, like I'm not quite sure, but there probably is a good reason why you all spent this much effort doing this thing, and like why, if you think back to just what you enjoyed about it, which parts you really enjoyed, like that's what you want to start writing down and thinking carefully about. um, you know but again, like always, be positive. Okay, and then just never be negative. I can tell you personally, like, one, because I hang out in coffee shops, I like hear sometimes interviews where people are like, I probably shouldn't say this, but about my last job. Don't do that. No, you shouldn't say it. Don't say it. I also like have like with some people that I'm not in this class, but before, like, I've been prepping people for interviews for a while. They'll just they'll make it known. They'll be like, yeah, I don't want to go into it, but it just wasn't a good experience. Like, no, you're not hiding them from but you're not doing the professional thing by saying this was bad, but I'm smart enough not to talk about it, right? You everything was good. Okay. So it's not like sales wasn't for me. It was, hey, so while I was there, it got me the opportunity to learn more about like these products and how they're built, and I became more passionate about it. Or like, that environment was terrible for me. Like, you're never saying that. It's always like, I worked in this, it was interesting. You say something positive, and then what got it into you. I've personally blown an interview, like when I was like 25, by just like complaining too much about my law job. And what I learned from that was, like, they sympathized with me. They're literally like, in the interview, I was like, oh man, that's awful. I'm sorry, man. Like, I was just up last night till like 3 a.m. writing down, and it was true. Like, I was up the night before, like, till 3 a.m. writing down a transcript of a deposition that it was in China. So I was there all hours and like couldn't even like leave my desk to go to the bathroom. And they sympathized with that, but I did not get the job. I blew the final round interview. Okay, so if you complain, like, even if it actually is horrible, you will not get hired. Okay, and now that I'm on the other side, and it's at where I've been in meetings where we're deciding whether or not to hire people. I remember a person that was really, really strong, and I wanted to hire him. Being interviewed by various members of the team, and he talked about a workplace that I know, like, from other people that work there, is very unpleasant to work at, and he mentioned it. And like, the other hiring people just flat out said, you're not supposed to do that in an interview, and so we can't hire him. And that is the reason why. So even if you are justified in your complaints, it will kill an interview. And this goes to any kind of like connection or anything like that, any type of networking event. Don't be negative. It will not help your cause, I promise you. Okay. So yeah, and I say, even about the job search, right? If people are like, that must be tough, or I hear it's, a rough market right now, something like that. Just by saying like, well, actually, like, it's given me the opportunity to go on these different things, go to these different events, see what people are doing. Like, always try to, and it's also actually good if you seriously do view it positively. But people, especially, I live in New York, people will always give you the opportunity to be negative about something. Don't take the bait. All right, just be positive. Okay, and try to view things in a positive light. Again, like, it doesn't help you because, one, and I put out the answers here. One, they might just see you as, they might be afraid that you're not going to enjoy your next work experience either. And then two, the other thing is, it takes, you're not in a position of strength anymore. It's like, oh, the job process isn't fun. Well, that means you just really want to get out of it as fast as possible, right? And you're not, being picky, or like, you're not in a position where you can really, things are okay. You'll figure out the next thing. You're just like kind of a little desperate. Like, that's not the right attitude. And you don't want to give the impression of like, I didn't like this, so I decided okay, maybe this, right? That's not passionate about something. That's process of elimination, right? So as like someone junior, and someone breaking in, they're banking on your passion as a way that you can like really grow your skills. Without that basically what they're getting, it's like what they see is what they get, but if it's like you're somebody who's curious and interested and excited, that's why they hire new people, right? Is to bring that interest to the workplace. Okay. So yeah, so these are, various, kind of like, kind of bringing up your elevator pitch, kind of in different scenarios, right? So definitely watch these and read through this, and then the next thing is, actually writing out your elevator pitch. And I would do is write this out, just like, not that you'll not that you're going to memorize this, obviously, word for word, but write it out word for word, because at least for me, I feel more I feel more comfortable like talking about something if I write it down first. And when the time comes, you're gonna have to say words, not bullet points. So like if you can't do that when you have the time to think about it, you're not gonna be able to do it. When later on in an interview. Okay. So, and the other thing is, of course, then we can review it. So same thing, like upload this to Hunter, um, say make a copy of it, and then we can help you with this. But the main thing is, right, it's like you're always kind of like, being, this is a job that you're trying to break into. If you're not interested in it, it's like, why are you, like that's the idea. Is like make sure that you're showing your interest. Cool. All right. Cool. So I will deploy this stuff, right? The building a connection, tapping into an existing network, right? Here we ask you to write down uh, those steps, like, some people, crafting an elevator pitch, writing your elevator pitch. And then I'll also deploy this stuff on in-person networking, kind of just like step by step, and then informational meetings, because I know some of you are doing this, so I want you to just feel more comfortable. And then finally, like, these are some elevator pitches that I wrote out about, like, past internships. If you want to look at these, that's fine too. And then the last thing is, I'll deploy a leak code, because I feel like you guys probably want to code a little bit some more too. So, we can do some leak codes afterwards if you have time. And then, I do want to start giving you time to work on your project too. So, these aren't super long. So after these, if you have time, you can work on your project and pursue that. In terms of projects, one other thing to mention is, for some of you, doing like a Code for America type project. Let me just talk about this very briefly. Right, like, so you can do Code for America brigades and look for various, click on find a brigade, and then say you're in like California or whatever. You can see a brigade that's close to you. You can, if there's not a very good brigade, a lot of these or meet online weekly. So you can, I can suggest some that I know are pretty active, and it's a good way for you to both, improve your skills, work on a project, but then also to meet people. So if you don't feel as very comfortable like going to these events, this is at least a first start. Is to do this stuff. We are going to obviously encourage you to go to in-person events too, but you can make some connections, going to these Code for America, because they're on Zoom, right? And you become a regular. And that's like another key to some of these things, is become a regular at them, right? If you meet two people and then you go to the next one and they're there, like, it's a little more comfortable. Cool. All right, questions about any of this? All right. So I deployed this.